Really hard for women in society back in like the 17, 1800s to live in a society where they were oppressed by men.
Yeah, I know. I was doing some research and I saw that in both Europe and the United States in the 1840s, they both had women's rights movements, and they really wanted the abolition of privileges of sex and race and rank. And in the United States, they fought for the abolition of slavery because they thought if that could be abolished, then maybe women's rights could get better as well. And in Europe, they marched with the workers and the poor because those were the lowest classes then. Also, women stuck by the notion of that liberty for men was also liberty for women because, you know, when we think of all men are created equal, well, we think of men and women as well. Today we think of that, but they didn't back then, so they really fought for that.
Yeah, I mean, the rise of the common man in the 1800s was a liberal political theory that applied to males who owned private property and traded. Women were not considered part of this, and they were only supposed to work at home and depended on their husbands in separate spheres reserved for economic political rights only for men. And then the European Enlightenment also raised debate over women's education because it was becoming more critical and hard to withhold women from it. Especially, with the printing press, books were becoming more easily to get. And before the printing press, it was only the elites could read, but afterwards, anyone could read. And so women really questioned why they were not getting any education. And there was Enlightenment writers such as Jacques Rousseau who believed that education wasn't necessary for women because they were rational or because they were the only power they had over anything was just to be manipulative, and men wouldn't support them, so they thought education was just going to go to waste. But then there was early advocates like Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz and Mary Estelle who really fought for women's rights and tried to make a change in that society at that time.
Sor Juana Inés, that was the nun, right?
Yeah, she was a Mexican nun.
That's cool.
Yeah, and there's also the French Revolution, which actually made a lot of people question whether who should be educated. Should it be the higher classes or the lower classes? And people like Harriet Taylor Mill tried to distinguish between things like castes, which is something that we associate with older civilizations, and because we're moving into a more modern era, we should be able to educate everybody, and everybody should have equal rights. Whereas John Stuart Mill, who was her husband, thought that it would actually grow the economy if we had more people who were in the working force, and education was a really big part of that. Plus, Wollstonecraft was also a big advocate for that as well, and they all sort of embraced the Enlightenment era, as you said before, and they were pretty sharp critics of Rousseau, who only thought that women should be working as wives, and people like Bonaparte, who thought that property and women should be taxed and all the rights should be given over to the husbands.
Yeah, I think that early literature by people like Mary Wollstonecraft and John Stuart Mill helped build kind of a fan base for those types of ideas. And then with the rise of education in the lower classes, with national movements like religious liberalization, utopianism, and anti-slavery were going through Europe and the United States, there was more of a base of people to latch onto them and actually start working towards change. And during the 1820s to the 1850s was when women and advocates for women started getting together and actually talking about changing things and trying to work through the government and actually change some of the marriage laws that made women like slaves.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to learn more about this. Maybe we should go back in time and speak to some of these people.
I think that's a great idea.
Wow.
Yeah, let's do it.
Hello, I'm Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. I believe that women's souls are equal to those of men. Because of this, we deserve equal education so we can study the Word of God more closely. Women should be able to teach because girls can identify with us and they're more receptive to our teachings. Women in the Bible, such as Deborah, Abigail, and Esther, all held high statuses because they were learned women. Deborah, for example, even set up laws regarding politics and established military laws as well. If these women of faith were permitted to be educated and study, women today should be able to do just the same. Also, if fathers want to educate their daughters beyond what is customary, they must bring in men to teach them. So, if women were able to teach them, the fathers wouldn't have to have the risk of the men and their girls having relations beyond what is accepted. So, I believe that education, especially in the religious realm, should be allowed for women.
Hello, my name is Mary Estelle. I'm a Protestant woman fighting for women's rights, especially regarding the church. I insist that women are as rational as men and emphasize the importance of female self-esteem and community, especially in this day and age where women are oppressed by men in society. We as women have to stick together in order to overcome this. Just as Catholic women have the option of joining convents instead of marrying, I believe Protestant women should too, which is why I wrote the serious proposal to the ladies. I invite women to a religious retreat where you can further your knowledge and have a better understanding and relationship with God. It won't cut you off from society. For what you may no longer pass for the useless animals. For since God has given women as well as men intelligent souls, why should they be forbidden to improve them?
Hello, I'm Mary Wollstonecraft. I believe that the best way to further women in society is through education. Women right now are similar to flowers who are planted in too rich of soil. This makes them bloom too early and waste their lives away on being beautiful. This means that once they've passed their prime and are considered no longer beautiful, men see them as not worthy in the world. While the laws of nature make men and women different, this does not mean that men should further push women down in society. Men do this by encouraging beauty in marriage and diminishing the strength of body and mind. However, women cannot be expected to change until they find some independence from men. Otherwise, they will continue to act the same and try to make their way in the world. The first duty of a woman should be to be a mother. Neglecting domestic duties leaves women powerless. I feel that by learning to be good mothers, women can be affectionate and also find happiness in domestic life. This will further their equality. I also feel that women do not have to act like men to do well in society, but they can find their own professions, such as nursing and being physicians. They can also pursue politics and business. Let women share their rights, and she will emulate the virtues of man.
Good afternoon, I'm John Stuart Mill. I'm a little busy writing legislature for Parliament, but I've got a few things to say about women in politics. First off, I have to give a large amount of credit to my wife Harriet, who strongly influenced me in my advocacy for women's rights. But moving forward, we are going into a modern age, the 1800s, after abolitionary movements. Consider the justice for women. They have to bear physical suffering for us, and yet are allowed only the rights of slaves. So let's also consider the French Revolution that has occurred, and people being educated who are not only rich, but poor. If we allow everybody to have the right to be educated, it will grow the economy, as stated in a lot of my papers. We cannot allow women to be restrained of their God-given rights as well. We have a social obligation as men to not treat them as slaves and ask of them an emotional attachment to us. We shall not restrain their happiness let them dry up to the profonto and leave their species less rich to unappreciable in all that makes life valuable to the individual happiness.